America went down in the past 5 years. It went down 15% in consumption, and it was quite steep. I don't think it's an exception that the ready-to-drink, and especially the hard seltzer, has increased to $45 billion turnover in the United States. So basically there's a shift in the way the people approach the alcohol beverages. So from wine to something else, easier, quicker, a little bit less pretentious. What it tells us is that definitely there is a misalignment between production and demand. The inventory so high is a signal of a market that needs to rethink volumes, positioning, sometimes probably even the ambition of some areas or some producers. I remember having exactly this conversation and replying exactly the same questions, just changing Gen Z to millennials. I remember 15 years ago in marketing, and people were asking, oh, millennials are not drinking any longer. Millennials are reducing consumption. No, millennials change the way they approach wine.
Welcome back on Dolia Talks with me, Giovanni Minello. Now, Dolia Talks is a show where I sit down with the best sales and marketing professionals in the world of wine, spirits, non-alcoholic beverages, and in general drinks to discuss how the market is changing, where the market is going, how consumers are changing, how new generations are impacting the market, and in general, all the main trends about the beverage market. Our guest today is Alberto Lusini. Alberto is a CEO of Angelini Wines, and he has been an exceptional guest. Ahead of joining Angelini Wines as CEO, Alberto served as export manager, sales manager, chief operating officer at some of the largest food and beverage brands in the world. So Alberto has a truly unique point of view on where the market is going, and believe me, he didn't hold back in the interview. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and as always, if you have any feedback or suggestions, or you would like to be a guest in the podcast, reach out at the mail in the show notes. Hey Alberto, welcome on Dolia Talks.
Hi Giovanni, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you. So I would like to start from your career, because you actually covered many roles in the wine, and not only wine, but also in the food and beverage industry, from marketing to expert to management now. Given your experience, I would be curious of how you saw the market change in the past years, and actually also what you learned from other sectors that you are now applying to wine.
So I started over 20 years ago, always work in beverages, wine particularly, till 2019, right before COVID. And then I came back in 24, working for Angelini Wines, part of the Angelini Industries. Most of my career was spent between Europe and United States, managing importers and dealing with distributor importers. And yes, definitely the wine sector has changed dramatically, I would say, after COVID. I remember when, at the very beginning, wine was considered almost a habit. The growth of the sector was a given. I would say that in the 90s and early 2000, it was common to see 20% growth in the wine sector, especially in North America or in the new world like Asia or Australia and so on. Nowadays, the market has shifted. The consumption is going down. And there is definitely a misalignment between production and consumption that is generating this huge inventory that is clogging in the entire system. So what I learned from the other industry, I spent 5 years in coffee, and that is already a very concentrated and extremely competitive market. I think what we need to develop is a more stringent professional approach to the business, a very clear positioning, very clear pricing, very clear idea of what we're actually bringing to the market. So I think it requires a little bit more professional attitude and accountability as a business.
So you already mentioned some of the main trends happening actually in the wine market. You mentioned the rising inventories, for example. I would like to do something different with you and analyze the market on 4 key different trends that now I would say are on every LinkedIn post, on every newsletter that I read. So I would say it's what the wine market is talking about. And these 4 topics would be tariffs, the declining consumption, the rise of new generations and their consumption habits, and the low alcohol. I mean, we are still in January, so dry January has been a huge trend. Yeah.
Overall, I can say those are trends that may be relevant to discuss and interesting to discuss. And it's always good to look at trends, but I think there is underneath an extremely strong shift in the market. And, one of the things that we need to do right now, I was talking about professionalism and accountability. There is the concept of, we need to learn from other sectors to test faster, to fail faster, to adjust quickly, and to try to adapt to the an extremely fast environment quicker than before. So the trends are important. I think what happens inside the wineries is even more important. But we can very, very I like to talk about all the smaller and interesting trends in the market.
I will say we can give a complete picture of the market, and then maybe we can see actually what's going underlying all these trends, what's happening. Let's start from tariffs. So actually people are, I would say, panicking on some way. Then I speak to experts for the market like you, and they tell me actually tariffs are not that big of a deal. So could you help us actually understand?
They do not help for, I would say that the major impact is uncertainty. Is not the tariff itself. Giving away 15% of your marginality is not easy. Most of the time is shared between distributor, importer, and supplier. And you can kind of, manage your price activities, your promotional activities in order to try to control the economics. The problem is uncertainty. It makes your planning extremely difficult. Your investment have a very short timing. It impacts the relationship with your importer because now you need to talk about the marginality instead of market growth. But it's not the end of the world. First of all, tariffs in the US went up, but we're discussing right now Mercosur with a reduction in tariff. There has been a sharp, with CETA, CITA, a sharp reduction in Canada. We're discussing, a few days ago, we were discussing about cutting in half the incredible high tariffs of India versus wines. So moving them from 150% to 75%. And eventually down the road arriving to 20%. So tariffs go back and forth. I remember, I give you a story about that. I remember when I was managing a wine importer in the US, there was 2013, 2012, more or less, and the dollar was close to 160 versus euro. So the exchange ratio was a hidden tariff. Nowadays, one of the things that we should look even is we have one of the weakest dollar ever in the past 10 years. And that affects the final pricing as much as the tariffs. And we never talk about exchange ratios. Euros is strong versus yen, is strong versus dollar, is strong versus other currencies. And this doesn't help export. That is one of the main drivers of Italian wines all over the world. So it's a very complicated issue. I think the underlying message is tariff is one element of a macroeconomical shift of Italian wines.
So you mentioned Mercosur and India. Do you think we will actually see new markets taking the place of US for Italian wine exports?
I've been in the US. I was managing a wine importer in the US. I mentioned that. And then I was in the coffee business in the US. And no, there is no other market like US. Is the bigger, is the strongest, is the most brand-driven market in the world. There is no other US in the world. In order to replace US, you should do like Elon Musk and move to Mars. The Mercosur is a very interesting market. It could represent an opportunity to find new markets and new people for your brands. And of course, it's always important to have a global perspective on export. But US is by far, it's impossible to replace, basically. We just need to be probably more focused, going a little bit deeper, and not only looking at the geographic, but look at understanding what you represent in terms of brands, and maybe targets better the market. It means a better execution in the way you do export, a little bit more long-term relationship with your partner, building new distribution channels, understanding all the different channels where the wines are consumed nowadays. There is not only restaurants, not only groceries. I think it's a little bit more complex. But yes, I mean, tariffs, they are not, it's more uncertainty than anything else.
So let's say if we were advising a young winemaker, would we still tell him to go and export to the US? Or would maybe
tell him to focus on other markets.
Other than you're a very boutique winery and you are satisfied with I don't know, with Switzerland only, or only with online sales, or only with B2C sales, or your wine shop. If you are a global player or a winery above, I don't know, 50 million euros, something like that. So basically a medium player in a small player in the world, I would say it's impossible to skip United States.
So let's go to the second trend, which is the global declining consumption of alcohol, which has led, I think, latest data was 10% in wine remaining in inventory globally. So what?
America went down in the past 5 years. It went down 15% in consumption, and it was quite steep. And the market has been replaced by, there are many, I mean, I don't think there is only one driver, but I don't think it's an exception that the ready-to-drink, and especially the hard seltzer, has increased to $45 billion turnover in the United States. So basically there's a shift in the way the people approach the alcohol beverages. So from wine to something else, easier, quicker, a little bit less pretentious, like a hard seltzer. What it tells us is that definitely there is a misalignment between production and demand. We have been pretty stable for many years. There were new markets coming in. United States was definitely moving from spirits to wines. So there was an import was booming all over the world. So import in the United States, import in Canada, and so on. So the market opened up to really a global demand of wines. Nowadays, this trend is basically has reached its peak. I don't say that it's going away, but it's reached its peak, is more or less saturated. So now we see probably more sharply the misalignment of production. Now there's definitely, we have to see, I mean, the inventory so high is not is a signal of a market that needs to rethink volumes, positioning, sometimes probably even the ambition of some areas or some producers. I believe it's a cycle. I'm not pessimistic. I think sooner or later the market will realign. Probably we will see different logics in the way we approach the market, different balances between production and consumption.
Do you think we will see an increasing consolidation of the market? So smaller brands getting acquired by larger brands?
Let's say that there are 30,000 wine producers only in Italy. 30,000, okay? And I think the biggest brand in Italy, or the bigger brands in Italy, they do not arrive to 1% of market share. If I go to the United States, E.J. Gallo represent 20% of the shelf in a grocery. So there is already a huge concentration. If I go to France, there is Castel. There is a huge conglomerate of wineries. So I think it will happen. I think it will take time. I do not believe that in the next 3 years the market will consolidate in Italy as it is consolidating in Chile, for example, where there is a couple of big producers, or in Australia. But I think it's a long journey, and it will happen in the long term. But we already see very precise signs of consolidation, both in production and distribution.
Do you think it makes sense to launch a new brand in these market conditions?
Oh, it depends. It depends what is your the good people say your unique selling proposition. If you believe you have the right product, if you believe you have the right way to come to the market, I don't see why you couldn't be successful in the market. I have my neighbor where I live in Trento. There are two young brothers, very young. They started, I think they started this business 10 years ago. And they produce an extremely successful Trento DOC, so classic method sparkling wine. Good quality, very, very sharp prices, they're very dynamic. They're very, I don't like to say passionate in business. I do not believe that passion is the only driver of success. I think, the right thinking is more important than passion. But I think they're doing a great job and they're very successful. So I think there is room for that. Another group of people, they launched Radice Errante, I think 5 years ago during COVID, and they're doing a very good job. I think there is room. I think that a lot of old people that do not have the right attitude and the right discipline, I would say they will go out of business. So and you see a lot of M&A happening in these days. So market is changing, definitely.
And this global deconsumption, I would say, is often associated with newer generation. They say Gen Z drinks less wine, Gen Z drinks more no-alcoholic products. Is this actually true? Because sometimes you see data that says it's not true. So what do you see happening actually on the market?
So understanding Gen Z is not easy, and I do not believe that at my age I'm the right person to understand Gen Z. What I can say is that I remember having exactly this conversation and replying exactly the same questions, just changing Gen Z to millennials. I remember 15 years ago in marketing, and people were asking, "Oh, millennials are not drinking any longer. Millennials are reducing consumption." No, millennials change the way they approach wine. They definitely move wine out of the table. It doesn't mean that they do not drink at restaurant, but they do drink even without the food. That's something that was unbelievable like 30 years ago. So now wines has found new venues. And at the very beginning, yes, every young kid approaching to a new world doesn't have the financial strength to approach wines that are 60, 70, $100 or euros a bottle. They start probably, looking for niches and drinking what they like. What happened though, I give you the example of millennial again, because I do not know if it's going to be true for Gen Z. I don't have a crystal ball, but what happened to millennials is that when they reach 37, 40 years old, they started to buy, and they started to buy at a higher price point versus boomers and Gen Z and Gen X. That is my generation. So there are better customers in terms of fine wines, definitely less volumes, but they definitely push the envelope towards fine wines. And they became extremely demanding. So I do have hope for in terms of business for the Gen Z. We need to be clear, we need to be extremely authentic, and we need to be fast in the way we communicate. Wine is not fast. Wine is an extremely slow industry. The way it's produced, the way it's marketed is extremely slow, but communication and the way we approach the consumer doesn't need to be slow.
Do you think we will see actually a change in how wine gets communicated? You mentioned authenticity. I'm also thinking about, for example, branding in some cases. If you look at the new brands coming to market, they have much more modern branding compared to traditional wine brands. So do you think that it will actually drive a global change in the wine industry? Or do you think the traditional way of communicating wine will still work?
So in beverage, I work both in what is considered commodities and in premium products. Okay, commodities have a precise system. They work, definitely they work on promotion. They're extremely sensible on pricing. They usually have in marketing they have sensitivities of pricing. There are 2-3 points. So if you discount 20%, you sell 60% more. That's a commodity business. Wine is not a commodity. Even the cheapest wine is not a commodity, because there is a part that is generated by the emotion and lifestyle and identity in wines that kind of justify the premium price that is paid for a grape juice, for a fermented grape juice. Wine is not a fermented grape juice. I think the story and the emotion will always be extremely important in the sales of wine. Otherwise, it will become a commodity and the entire industry will collapse. And I do not believe that we're going to go in that direction, because I think it's a need for the consumer to be part of the story, to be part of that identity. But definitely we will see a huge change in the way we will communicate wines. A little bit, I hope a little bit less pretentious. I hope we will just stop having all our noses in the glass and tell about the technical details about we produce the wine that I don't think nobody really cares about. I think we need to try to really convey the messages that are important for the people that are listening to us, and try to understand why the people approach the wine and why they want to have a good bottle of wine with them in order to socialize. That is, I think, the key element of the reason because the people drink wine. Wine for 13,000 years has been the main driver of socialization. If we understand that and we stop to being pretentious, I think we can continue to leverage on the biggest assets of this industry.
Do you think that will change between mass market wines and fine wines?
I think fine wines are better suited for the future versus mass market wines. Again, I do not. I give you the example. I was working in coffee, okay, and I'm not saying that coffee is commodity only, but there is a good share of coffee that is commodity. Actually, coffee is traded on New York Stock Exchange. Is traded in London. Everybody knows the cost of coffee. Coffee is sold in mass market 90% on promotion. Wine is not. Even the cheapest wine, this is not a commodity. And I really believe in this. I think we'll see a change in the way we marketeer what you call mass market wines. So mass market wines needs to convey a better reason in order to arrive to the consumer. I think they will suffer more than fine wines in the future, because fine wines, if they are done properly, if their proposal is not only the price that is high, but is a real history, like Bertani. I represent Bertani. I work for Bertani. Bertani has 170 years of history. It's an icon of enology in Veneto. Is one of the first producers of Amarone. It has a legendary library of all vintages, and is a style that is extremely unique, sometimes austere, sometimes restrained, but extremely consistent. I think that story is going to be easier to convey than a middle range product on the shelf at $10.99 on a shelf in the United States. Just because I have a lot of things to say. The challenge for mass market is trying to understand exactly what to say.
Yeah, it makes sense. Bertani will probably never need to change the label or the brand or the colors.
I don't think so. No, I think it's going to stay, and I do believe the wine is going to stay. As I said, you don't change 13,000 years of wine tradition, and so wine has a stronger relation with humanity versus bread. So you can say whatever you want, but it's our culture. It's part even of our religious activities. So it's really part of the humankind. So I do not believe it's going to go away. I think we went in a very strong, when the mass market arrived, we thought that only price and so was the driver. I think we need to reconnect with the social part of the wine community.
Last trend I wanted to touch upon is the rise of no and low alcohol products.
That's interesting. It's we go back to the trends. First of all, we do low alcohol and zero alcohol. As Angelini, we represent 6 wineries. I talked about Bertani. Then we have a winery in Friuli that is called Puiatti, and Puiatti produce a low alcohol, natural low alcohol. Natural low alcohol means that you do everything in the field in order to arrive to a good maturity, but with low sugar level in order then to develop a low alcohol. So that's Puiatti. And then in Fazi Battaglia in Marche, we produce a zero alcohol, so a product that is de-alcoholized. So basically something that you do in the cellar. So basically there is a process where you remove the alcohol and you arrive to zero. So we do that. Now, let's look at the other side of the coin. It represents less than 1% of the business, okay? So I would say that no alcohol nowadays is like 4 times smaller than rosé. So it is growing, but from a very, very small standpoint. The other point is that the vast majority of zero alcohol right now are positioned extremely low. That they definitely represent the lowest part of the price scale. So the smaller segment. So is it interesting? Yeah, probably will. I'm not against, but I would like just to give you the right perspective. Third point, producing low alcohol and zero alcohol is more expensive than producing good, regular good wines, because there is additional processes they have to do. So from a winery perspective, from a business perspective, they are not as relevant in marginality versus others. So considering those three elements will be the future of the wine industry, no, it will be always a niche. What I believe, okay, I told you before, I don't have the crystal ball, but I do not believe that there will be the future of the wine industry. But I do see some trends, even in gastronomy, that there are even 3-star Michelin that are proposing a no-alcohol beverage solution versus wine. Most of the time, I have to say that in 3-star Michelin, this is not a de-alcoholized wine. It's usually what is called a gastronomic beverage. So something produced with tannins from teas or roots. So it tries to mimic the effect of alcohol and wines on your food experience. The alcoholized wine could be an approach for younger generation just to taste the idea of wine. It's very difficult to recreate the effect of alcohol on your experience, because alcohol is the driver of perfumes and is the driver of richness in the mouth, so it's extremely difficult to represent. It will be a niche, very interesting niche. We are looking at this niche from inside, so we're not looking from outside. We're researching, we're trying to do our best, but again, is not the main focus of our marketing activities.
I read an interview from the founder of Feral. They get requests from winemakers to help us make a fermented drink. Do you think that actually is like a panic move, or they're trying to jump on the trend, or do you think in the long term that makes sense?
I think the winemaker, like our winemaker at Angelini, they always been pounded by by sales, by myself, by marketing about what we can do and so on. So they are curious about that. The young crew of Feral, I think I'm a big fan of them. I have to say, I need to admit that. I think they are doing a very good job. I tasted all their products. I personally bought all their product, and I made a personal tasting with friends in order to understand what they are. But again, I think they are doing extremely good in a niche, and I think the winemaker are interested to understand the niche. But I think that our winemakers should still focus on something that I think is massively more important: how we can produce the same style of Amarone Bertani and Brunello Valdesuga with a completely different climate condition. I'm probably one of the few, after all the shift in sustainability and the priority in sustainability, that right now is no longer, it seems is no longer a priority, but at Angelini we believe it still is. We made a full climate risk assessment last year. I think there are just a few wineries in Italy that did it. I'm not talking about the climate balance. I'm talking about the risk assessment. Just to understand in the next 20, 30 years what is going to be the impact of climate on winemaking. And we know that in the next 20, 30 years, there will be an effect of 30% on the cost of producing grapes in our regions. We're in 4 regions in Italy, so we're going to see an extreme increase in the cost, and we need to rebalance that from a technical perspective. So if I have to look at my winemaker and tell him, listen, what you need to focus on, I would say that he needs to focus more on the way we can produce the same style at the right price, at the right cost, in a completely different environment, versus producing, a gastronomic beverage.
Interesting. And what do you think sustainability means in the wine industry? One of my previous guests was Santiago Navarro from Pacamama. They are super focused on packaging. So they made these flat recycled PET bottles because they say glass is actually one of the main polluting factors in the wine industry. Do you think there's other things actually?
Okay, moving heavy glass all around the world it's a mistake. Definitely reducing glasses, but that's one activity. The biggest impact is actually, I do not believe is glass, I think is fertilizers. According to our climate risk assessment, okay? Not, I'm looking at our numbers. I think fertilizers and the way we work in the field is extremely important. I give you a very, I'm a manager, so I give you a very solid reason because sustainability is important. And that was economic. At the very end, sustainability means that I need to produce wine in an affordable way in order to be relevant for my consumer and relevant for my investors. Because producing wines, wasting money, it's not very sustainable. If environment, if climate has an impact on my costs, that's relevant. And we saw, I give you an example of Puiatti, okay? And Puiatti and Marche. We had 4 years in a row of hail in Puiatti. So we are considering to put hail nests on top of the vineyards. It's an investment of 30,000 euros per hectare. So it's a big investment. It's like the cost of replanting completely the field. But that I think is gonna offset the cost of hailing year by year for the next 10 years. And then I give you the example of Marche, where we have Fazi Battaglia, where it's basically we had, other than 2025, that was good vintage, the previous 3 vintages, we had a huge problem with water. So we had no water. The PLV, so the production in the fields was extremely low because there was no rain precipitation. And the same problem was in California for the past, I think, 5 or 6 years. So the way we impact irrigation system in market, in the investment irrigation system in market, that's going to be a sustainability choice. That's very economical. Then, of course, pollution, green gas emission, that's extremely important. That's part of our social responsibility more than sustainability. That's what I personally think. But after working with Angelini and investing a lot of money in investigating the risk of climate change.
And so you mentioned all these brands in your portfolio. My understanding is that these brands actually stand on also different positionings, different price points, different target markets. Which are the main differences you see? And actually, how do you manage all these differences?
We're a multi-brand company. I mean, we're not the only one. Angelini is a multi-brand group. We move from pharmaceutical to consumer goods to wines. Probably nobody understands that Angelini is not only Tacchiperine and Moment in Italy, but it's even Linas, Pampers, and Ace in the consumer goods, and 6 wineries in wine, even though we represent only 1% of the total turnover. Multi-brand means a lot of discipline, treating each brand with a lot of autonomy. So our marketing is divided by brand. Is the only choice? No, but it's the choice that we took in order to give each brand its own tone of voice. Each brand gathered to a completely different consumer. It has its own identity, its own market logic, its own go-to-market strategy. Of course, in terms of efficiency, we try to have all brands that are more or less in the same, let's say, distribution model. Otherwise, it would be extremely difficult. I give you an example. If Bertani Valdisuga is high-end on-premise, for us, it's actually easier to have another brand that is strong in on-premise premium. If I start to have a brand that is mass market, specific mass market, or Tetra Pak, for example, I would need a completely different sales structure. There would be less efficiency in the company.
And how do you see, since you mentioned Bertani, of course, which has a long tradition, do some of these brands have a stronger focus on in-person experiences, on winery visits? Or do some of these brands have a stronger focus on direct sales or on supermarkets?
That's something that I think we need still to work on. Most of them, I would say 90% of our portfolio is on-premise focus, and our sales is more or less 50% Italy, 50% export on a geographical standpoint. Of course, we're too small to have a vertical integration downstream. It means we don't have we don't own an importer, we don't own a distributor. I think vertical integration will happen very soon. For most of the wine, at least for the bigger wineries. Every single brand has its own approach, but I think we need to develop better some of these activities. Getting back to your question, I think we need to do much better in B2C and hospitality and experience. I think it will be a main driver of growth for us, for all the brands that we represent in the next 5 years. We are investing, probably the vast majority of our investment right now is towards hospitality experience and B2C versus regular distribution activities. And yes, there are some brands that are more ready than others, but I don't think we're at the right point for any brand that we represent. I think there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to develop this new channel of activities.
When you say we need to do much better in terms of hospitality and experiences, what do you think is the right way actually of structuring this kind of experiences?
Generally speaking, is B2C. I mean, I always look at France or Napa Valley. I think Napa Valley alone does more or less the same hospitality. Napa Valley and Sonoma does the same hospitality business that Italy does. And I think France is like 3 times higher than Italy in terms of hospitality. There are wineries, even important wineries in California, that sells 60-70% of their total sales directly at the shop. We're probably more fragmented. We don't have such a tourism in Italy. Again, France is doing much better, but I do believe that we can do much more. Doesn't mean that we're going to arrive there, but we can do much, much more. So definitely bringing the people at the winery, having the capability to let them rest at the winery, experience the winery, experience the wine, having an enjoyable time at the winery, that's going to be key. And then we need to make sure that the same experience moves to online, moves to clubs, moves to events abroad. Next week, we're going to be at the St. Regis in Venice for final consumers. We're organizing in Paris an activity for collectors. It's going to be like a special event, not really a dinner, but a special event in Paris. Last year, I was personally in Dubai making a presentation at a party of Indian billionaires with Bertani. So I think there are many different ways to arrive directly to the consumers with something more than just gathering a bottle through a supermarket or an online distributor, an online shop. I think we need to learn who are our consumer and try to speak directly with them. And that's going to grow dramatically. Consider that in Italy, where the luxury all over Europe actually, the luxury segment after COVID went down dramatically, more than wine, much more than wine. The only segment was growing in luxury year after year after year, I think with a CAGR of 6%, was luxury hospitality. And I think there is a request for that. And because we represent brands that are very boutique-y, I think we have something to say.
And what do you think is the impact of ratings and awards on all of this? For example, Bertani won the Wine of the Year 2024. Now there's the Michelin Guide for wineries. What do you think actually is the impact on hospitality and consumer choice?
I give you our direct experience. So last year, our Amarone got 100 points by James Sackley. That is considered the perfect score. It doesn't happen often that you get 100 points. Actually, I think in Veneto, we've been the only one. We've been best wine in the world for James Sackley, best wine of Italy by the same product, best wine of Italy from Corriere della Sera, best wine in UK by Decanter, and Bertani Amarone is, if you look at Wine Search, I don't know, are you familiar with the platform Wine Search in the United States? Is one of the most affluent platform for searching wines all over the world. And they rank the most awarded and important brands in the world. And the top 10 from Italy, the only one from Veneto is Bertani Amarone. There is no other wine from Veneto. There is the typical wine from Tuscany and from Piedmont. This is it. The 100-point Amarone from James Suckling lifted the sales of Amarone Bertani 20% on that specific vintage. So yes, it had an impact in sales. Does it happen for all the other ratings? Not at all. There are maybe too many ratings. And sometimes they become not so relevant. I do believe that it is important to keep a consistent high scores in the top magazines. So The Advocate, The Spectator, The Enthusiast, James Suckling, Decanter, Falstaff, Venus. This is more or less Gambero Rosso in Italy. Okay, that's more or less the scenario. It's important to have brands from everybody. Ratings from everybody. Probably is redundant. I don't say it's not important. It's probably redundant. But I do believe that the connection with the consumer nowadays is moving towards a little bit more about the emotional connection, the experience versus the rating. Rating has been extremely important in the 90s, where you had the entire North America that was approaching wine, moving out of spirits and beer, and they needed to have something easy like a movie rating. The fact that it's from on a 100-point scale, it's because it was the movie ratings in the United States. Rating was actually the movie. When you had to go out on Saturday, you were looking at the rating, and if a movie was 90 points, you had to go and watch it, right? Parker understood exactly this, and he moved to 100-point ratings. I think it was important when the consumer was approaching that. Nowadays, with social media, with we are bombarded by communication. I think there are other ways to talk with your consumers.
So I will go towards the conclusion of the interview. I have this section I call quick fire. So I will ask you some questions, which are very quick questions, and I would like to have a very quick answer. So the first one would be, if you could give 3 tips, 3 suggestions to a young producer listening to this podcast to structure the sales and distribution strategy.
First of all, be patient, be professional. Second is build extremely carefully your brand identity. And second, I would say understand cash flow. So understand the economics, because passion sometimes doesn't match with economics.
Do you agree with this statement? The marketing team and the sales team don't talk to each other enough in wine.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah. They should be the same. I mean, a good salesperson is somebody that studied in marketing. A good marketing person is somebody that did some sales. That's my understanding, and I think they should be 100% aligned in order to be effective. If they are not aligned, then you're wasting efficiency and you're wasting, most important, you're wasting money.
So let's say we wake up tomorrow and it's January 2036, so 10 years from now. What has happened to the wine market?
Probably clearer identities. So probably we understood what to do right, and the people that survived and has been selected by the market will be more relevant for the consumers.
So I was speaking to a person I know yesterday. He is a guy who's my age, so quite young, not that young anymore, quite young. And he recently bought a vineyard in Abruzzo. And he told me, look, the learning process has been so long. I had so much things to understand because I didn't have like family wine, whatever. I started from scratch. So let's say you wake up tomorrow and you inherited a vineyard and you have to start everything from scratch. What suggestions would you give to this person, and what actually would be the first 3 things you do?
Do a business plan. understand exactly what you want to do, try to do the things different from your neighbors in order to be relevant, and define your priorities. That's, I mean, like any other business, try to do the things professionally. I would say the same thing that I told you before for a young entrepreneur.
Nice. So complete this sentence. The wine industry would actually work much better if it stopped.
If we stop focusing on ourselves and our egos and focus a little bit more on consumers.
I always get this answer. I mean, 11 interviews, always this answer.
Because that's true. Because this is true. Consumer is king.
And the last one, which is actually a question I asked for myself. Which is your favorite wine, but you can't answer one of your portfolio?
So I cannot count from our portfolio. You say something from outside our portfolio. I think I will give you, first of all, I will give you something that is provocative. I would say I do not have a favorite wine. I change my favorite wine every single day. And that's true. This is the truth. I don't like, otherwise it would be so boring. It's the most fascinating things. We have so many. If I have to pick a wine today, what I'm in the mood right now, I would go for a nice cab from California. Today I'm in mood for a cab.
Fantastic. Alberto, it was a pleasure. Thank you for a great interview and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.